Warm welcome to a very special Lincolnshire Police Authority question time, and we're joined today at police headquarters by an audience of pupils and some staff from 6 schools throughout the county and also a contingent of young carers. You are very, very welcome. Let's go on straight away with our first question to the panel, who are Julia Higgins, who is a community beat manager. On my right is Fred Mann. He is a member of the Police Authority. And on Fred's right is Chief Inspector Phil Vickers, who is concerned with community safety. So the first question actually goes to you, Phil. How often is the Armed Response Unit called on in Lincolnshire? And do armed officers have to draw their weapons very often?
Okay, that's a good question. I think first of all, if I start off and explain what an armed response unit looks like, you'll get a better feel for the way that we work. Typically, an armed response vehicle in Lincolnshire will be 2 highly trained police officers. They don't routinely carry the firearms as part of their uniform. The firearms are locked away within a secure cabinet in the vehicle. We always deploy them as a pair. And the vehicles are routinely on patrol in Lincolnshire, but the weapons are locked away. So the majority of the time, there aren't officers who are deployed wearing firearms or in possession of firearms as part of their uniform. In terms of how many times do officers have to draw their weapon, one of the things that I've done is I've looked at the number of times that's happened over the last few years. And the figures that I've got are that in 2008, they drew their weapons 133 times. And in fact, in the years before 2008, there was considerably more than that. Typically, we would be looking at around about 150 times in any given year. What happened in 2009 is that there were 81 occasions where police officers took those firearms out of the locked cabinets in the vehicles and were deployed and went to incidents where they were making use of the weapon in one form or another. When I say making use of them, the fact that they are in possession of them as part of their uniform, that's a deployment so far as we're concerned. So that was 81 times, which was significantly less than the year before. So far this year, for 2010, there have been 82 deployments. So it's probably going to work out that this year there'll be slightly more than last year. But there's a significant change of direction and numbers of times that we've deployed our armed officers in the county between 2008 and 2009. And the difference, and one of the reasons for the difference, is that they've now got a different piece of equipment that the officers can make use of. And the piece of equipment they've got is called a taser. And taser isn't a firearm. It's not a gun as such. It's shaped a little bit like a gun, but as a piece of equipment, what it does is, if it's used, it fires 2 barbs, 2 hooks which look like fishing hooks, which are connected to copper wire, and the barbs are fired out of it, and the person that is subject to the taser, they'll lodge into their clothing, or it may lodge into their skin, but it'll lodge onto them, and the officer has control over an electric current that's then put through those wires and basically incapacitates the person. And if it sounds pretty horrible, it is pretty horrible. It's not a pleasant experience by any stretch, but the important thing is it's far less horrible than having a police officer fire a firearm, a gun, at you. So what happened between 2008 and 2009 was we put officers out with firearms far fewer occasions, and they used tasers probably to compensate for those. From my point of view, it's a far safer way of doing business, because it means that we are far less likely to have to fire a firearm, and that ultimately is the last resort. It's the last thing that we want to be doing. And people who are subject to a taser are generally recover very, very quickly. In fact, as soon as the current is turned off, then that's it. There should be no long-term impact. So it's a really useful tool for us if we're dealing with somebody who's violent or somebody who's in possession of a knife or a gun or any other type of weapon, and it's one more option that the officers have, and it's less offensive. So in terms of, do officers have to draw their weapons very often? Well, I say so far this year it's 82 times. And in a rural county, in a county like Lincolnshire, where we have several thousand registered lawful firearms licence holders, where shotguns are part of the way of life, particularly in the rural community, that's actually not bad, really. When you think about firearms are used as a tool for farmers, and they're used for recreation for people who go shooting and do, whether it's clay shooting or something similar, perhaps at a weekend. We've got a significant number of firearms holders in the county. So when you think about the number of weapons that there are in Lincolnshire, actually the fact that the police only deployed with firearms 82 times, I would say, is quite a low number.
Phil, thanks very much indeed. There's a supplementary question.
Why, in America, are the police armed with guns, but in England they aren't?
Okay. I guess I can't speak for America. I can only speak for the way that we do policing in this country. And for the most part, our police officers are not routinely armed. And I think that's a really good thing. I think that's quite a success so far as we're concerned. I've certainly travelled abroad, and people can't believe that our police aren't routinely armed, that the police officers don't always carry guns. And in this country, the difference is that we do what's called policing by consent. We don't force people into doing things that perhaps they don't want to do unless we believe that they've broken the law. But quite importantly, it means that the officers have to use their communication skills. And I'm very confident that the officers that we put out, in fact all of our police officers, but most specifically those that carry the firearms, are particularly well trained and are highly skilled in their communication skills. And the fact that so far this year we've put officers out with firearms 82 times, but actually those incidents have been diffused and the officers have used their communication skills, that's a real success for me.
Fred, I know we were talking before the audience came in about this very point. I don't know about you, but I still feel very nervous if I go abroad and I see arms carried in the street.
Yes, I think that, I don't know how many here have been to America, but if they have, you would have seen every police officer will have a revolver on their hip. And if you go back in American history, of course, you can remember the sheriffs were the law officers. And they were gun-toting sheriffs in a gun-toting society. And for whatever reason, America is still very much like that. My eldest son spent 6 months studying in the southern states of America near a place called New Orleans, which you might have heard of. And he became friendly with an American girl who lived in a town called Memphis. And she invited him home for the weekend, and they went in her car. And as they were going along the auto route, the kind of motorway, she said to him, "Hey, do you mind opening the glove compartment and getting a tissue for me?" Well, he did so. He opened the glove compartment. He was in the passenger seat, and there, on top of the tissues, was a revolver. And he said, "What's that?" She said, "What do you mean?" "It's a revolver." And he said, "Is it loaded?" "Of course it is." And the question, she was totally surprised by the question. So he says, "Why have you got that?" He says, "Well, we've all got them." And you see, it's a completely different way of thinking. Because in America, there are very loose gun laws. If you go into Walmart, or that's the kind of American equivalent of Asda over here, or Sainsbury's, you walk in and you'll see a case of guns. And people can buy a gun in a supermarket. So it's a very, very different way of living. And in America, there's a very strong, what they call gun lobby. It's very difficult to change the laws. And that is why, in many ways, there are a huge number of gun crimes in America as compared with this country. And in this country, the police have never been armed in that way. Go back to the beginning of the police force, they were not armed with guns. They've always had guns available to them in the way that Phil was describing, but not routinely armed. Of course, you will see police in this country with guns. You'll see them at airports, particularly. You'll see them in very sensitive places. You go to London, you will see them outside places like Parliament, and they will be armed because they are sensitive areas and times have changed. But we're a very different society from America. And in many ways, I think I'm very glad I live here and I don't live in America, because I feel much safer here than I would do over there for the very reason I gave you.
Fred, thanks very much indeed. I'm going to give you, Julia, not to talk about gun laws, but Phil mentioned communication, and just briefly, because we're going to follow this up in the next programme, That's a big part of your job, communicating, isn't it?
Yes, we have to talk to all the general public, and in particular, as a beat manager, what we do is we go into schools and we like to talk to children, and I believe that if you talk to children at an early age, they gain respect to the police, they know that they can trust you, they become friends with you, and it just makes a much easier working relationship. And as Chief Inspector Victor said, it's a very important part of a police job is communicating. And not only do we talk to the children, we talk to parents, everybody. It is a big part of our job.
As I say, Julie, we'll explore that further in the next programme. For the moment, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience.